Welcome back, adventurers, to another episode of the Traveler Chronicles. I'm DM Eguile, your guide through the mysterious and chaotic world of Extraeus. Tonight we're diving deeper into the wonders and quirks of Arnknoka, the holy city of the Mirren tribes, where secrets and surprises await.
And I'm DNDWife. We've got a great episode lined up for you today, including some hilarious and awkward moments as Captain V and Tobias encounter Lady Cree, the Rooka elder, with a bit of a, well, let's say, special interest in one of our adventurers.
We're exploring everything from the secret missions to unexpected character connections, and we'll share some of our tips for DMs and players on keeping mysteries alive in your own campaign. There's a lot to unpack, so grab your travel pack and let's dive in.
And don't forget to stick around for our exclusive Traveler Tidings interview segment with Luna. Now, if you're ready to join us on another adventure, let's journey deeper into the world of Extraeus.
So this one's kind of a fun one, and one of the kind of scenes I really wanted to focus on that came out of our third session, relatively early in that third session. And it was the introduction of what I feel like is a pretty important NPC that kind of really stuck with the players, and that was Lady Cree. And the funny thing is that this wasn't necessarily the first introduction of her, as they had kind of... The travelers, they had met her once before, but it wasn't really it was just kind of like a passing glance, and this was all based around like an invitation to come speak to her. So I really kind of wanted to focus, because I felt this was a cool instance where, again, we kind of have this dynamic of my veteran players kind of pairing up with my rookie players. And this was another one of those where it was kind of a middle ground, because instead of it being like my true veterans with years and years of experience, it was another one of my newer players from a campaign prior.
That's true.
So it was kind of interesting to see kind of how these two were going to interact at the table, because it really was, at this point, their kind of first solo time together.
And
I always like to see, right, it's kind of a big deal, I feel like, for DMs, especially when you're starting an early campaign, to really take each of the players and kind of mash them up into different groups, right? And now when you
different combos,
start seeing kind of the dynamics and like, okay, how are these players going to play together? How do they complement each other? Or how can I use maybe some of their early dynamic to help play either a relationship to be good, or can I play them against each other by, if they are, so in this case where they're kind of both on opposite ends of the moral spectrum, that's where it's like that easy play of like, okay, cool, so this is like, good cop, bad cop. So it's kind of that thing. And so what was really important to me was it was not only was this scene so important because it was the introduction of Lady Cree, but it really was too also the kind of the first seeing of essentially our criminal and our moral, compass of good of our cleric. And kind of seeing exactly what kind of a dynamic, right? There's always that joke of like when you have like the paladin and the warlock, and
how do those
they're always
going
to hate each other and everything because they'll never see each other at the same point. So it was really kind of that first dynamic of like, okay, we don't have a paladin here, but we have a cleric, and we have a pirate rogue. So obviously there's some moral alignment differences. So it was really going to be interesting to see what that was. And I think too it was the character of Captain V and his player Thomas. He's very new to D&D at this point. This is his third session, and all to this point at the story he's had like kind of little sporadic conversations, and most of them have been with the other players. The other players kind of grilling him for information,
just wanting to know, demanding some answers,
which we've talked about in previous episodes. But this was kind of the first time that he kind of experienced what I would call one of my more lecherous NPCs that I've created.
Yeah, I don't think he was expecting this kind of interaction.
Yeah, I've had a lot of NPCs, and I always think it's fun to kind of spin that dial where it is, you find the one that's kind of the most reserved, and then your C is just like, oh, they just fanaticize about that person. And we've had that in different campaigns, in different effects, whether it was a love or just an overall idolization.
Yeah, just
kind
a big
of thing.
fan.
Yeah. But it was kind of funny to have this character, but it was more of kind of what I always thought of like Zsa Zsa Gabor, this kind of older actress.
Hello, darling.
Right. So she's this like kind of this dame who's just very much has, gone past her prime, but you can tell at one point was probably,
gorgeous,
very much, more like a peacock than, an old bird. And so it was really kind of this funny thing because this whole time, their first interactions, it was kind of their first interaction with a chieftain. So it's like the assumption of this regal person, and that's what they took from it to begin with. And then after, the early interactions that we'll go into, they quickly discovered that she's kind of a horny old bird.
A little bit.
And has like a fascination with the color blue.
Yeah, age has not diminished her love of it.
And I think it's funny that that's like the biggest part is that it wasn't necessarily me messing with a character per se.
Not really.
But it was that her thing was that she did love the color blue.
Yeah.
And I had written that not because to mess with Captain V, but was eventually actually to mess with one of my own NPCs of Miguel.
Yeah, to cause some issues and tension there.
That was originally supposed to be the stand-in. And it was not meant to be Captain V the whole time. It was meant to be someone to chase after Miguel. And he was this little scrawny guy. So it ended up being kind of swapped with how they treated Miguel and kind of how he exited the story. Yeah. So now they have to take his place of being the pinching bag, so to say, from Lady Cree. Yeah. But the biggest thing I think that's intuitive on this one, and this really showed because we're reviewing this now, and I mean, we're 28 sessions in at this point. So obviously talking about session 3 is a big jump, but I think really this kind of is a real reflective scene for me because it shows something that was going on in the background. And so a major thing was for some of my players, I introduced kind of a hidden background kind of idea. Yeah. Not everyone had this. Some of them had kind of hidden quests that could earn them some money. I think some of them had an option where it could get them a level in secret. And so some of these people had these kind of hidden things. And one of the ones that had kind of what I originally had planned to be the most important was Captain V. He was given the task where he was actually, now we've talked about it before, where he had this cargo and they were, he was just transporting and he was being very benign about it.
Yeah, it's just cargo.
And the party really kind of went with it for a while. And didn't really think much of it. Introductions. But really he had a quest where he was to meet someone to essentially deliver these same people. So his whole thing of just traveling and he has to see
joining the group
was also him overseeing the live delivery of a couple of the other players.
Of his cargo.
Well, this is what becomes kind of a funny thing. So because he has this information, now he had the beginning information. Now, for me, I had all this I'm a dungeon master. I had all this extra information. I had made a bunch of quest flyers and all this stuff. I had never given any of it to Thomas.
Oh, no, you forgot. That's right.
Yeah, so he had kind of the initial, like what we had written in his backstory, and he had been rolling with that the whole time. So this whole scene that's going on, I look at it now as it's so different because originally I was getting kind of frustrated because I'm like, man, he keeps going to the wrong people. Like, I don't understand why he's like mucking around. And I'm like, is this just his style? He's a new player.
Right?
Is he the one that just does like every side quest before going to the main quest?
Or did he not read? Did he not do his homework?
Yeah, right. And so what was so funny was I'm sitting there just kind of like trying to throw this information out. And he is, for all intent and purposes,
trying his best.
Doing not only that, but he's instinctually doing the story. Like he's trying to find this information out with little information of his own. And so it was really it's funny to look at it now because before I was just, thinking he just didn't know what was going on, wasn't trying to be, playing in the game. And it was like, okay, that's fine. In reality, he's struggling to figure out. I mean, he's like, Sunny in Philadelphia with the board, just trying to figure out every little clue because he has no clue besides like 2 names.
Yep, that's it.
So I mean, not only is it like, I feel like obviously I did a disservice, but at the same time, I think the story that got built out of that is probably better than had I actually given him the information.
Yeah.
Because what we end up seeing is that it just added so much more to the story because as much as it would be, he, obviously, unfortunately didn't know. Sorry, Thomas.
So sorry.
But because of him also not knowing, there was no way for a newer player to worry about metagaming or showing or revealing secrets because he didn't really know they were secrets.
Or moving too fast.
Yeah. And so I feel, it is maybe sometimes where less is more. And so you can get away with it by not necessarily giving every single detail.
Yeah.
And maybe that kind of mystery or that unknowingness actually can help build more into the story.
Gotcha. Did this kind of like affect the way that you, I suppose, like trickle out information to us now? Is it like a little more of a trickle than just a dump?
What I've started to do is more of just mark on my documents pages when I print it. So I'll put a line like that subscript that like cuts a line through it.
Gotcha.
In order to make sure, like, so the moment I print something, I'll like scratch it through, so then I kind of know what I've printed and what I haven't.
Yeah.
I feel like no matter what I do, it's still gonna always be like the curse of like not knowing if you gave all the information or
enough.
not.
Yeah.
And so that's why I don't want to like always. I try, I try, but I also think that is a big thing, right? So that there is that level of trust that you can put into your players. So when they have this information, and that's also why I like doing the kind of background hidden quests, right? So yeah, like everyone, you can always do the like everyone received a letter and you're all doing the same thing because you want to build them as a team. But sometimes, maybe giving half of the party a little hidden background. They could all be half the parties on one group. That little thing, and then just letting it build as it goes, right? So not building it to where you're telling the whole story already, but just little nuance. So then the player's confusion might actually lead them to more natural play. They might find themselves being more involved because, if the player's confused and the character's confused, they feel like they're really role playing.
Right.
When you're when you know everything that's going on and you're trying to role play confused, it might not come off the same.
It might obviously come off as faked and not genuine, so you don't get the same vibe.
And I really think learn this too between my two new players in that they can be overwhelmed. And so sometimes more information is not good for them. So in actuality, even though Thomas really didn't have much to go off of, his own like deductive reasoning and moving through the story and just being a gamer, he just kind of already instinctively knew kind of where he needed to
moving
do.
Through the checkpoints without reading the initial quest.
Like a few sessions down, when we finally figure this out, and I adamantly apologize over and over and over again, we obviously cleared up and cleaned it up, and now it's much smoother because obviously we're all on the same page now. But really, this kind of all just ties into why I chose the scene to focus on tonight's episode was because it kind of ties in so much with what was going on in the background, but at the same time, even without knowing what's going on in the background, the scene is still so good. It's such a cool introduction of a new NPC, as well as a way for, to kind of like shake up your players to really kind of loosen up. Like this is the third session of our third campaign, which we're all kind of buckling down, knowing that we take years to do campaign. So,
and that this especially is going to be a long one.
Episode 3, everyone's kind of like, all right, they're still getting ready to like buckle in. So it really is kind of that nice tipping point where it just shows that there's going to be both kind of the horror, the levity, and no matter what, we're going to have jokes and we're going to have fun. And this scene really kind of is indicative of that. Because really what it was is this kind of went around when all the kind of shenanigans were going on to the various
all
times.
of us were running around.
Right. We were seeing different pairs go off in different directions. And so during this time when all the shenanigans, there is a point where Captain V is trying to kind of skirt his way out of the group because he's wishing to find information that's based around his personal quest.
Yeah, because he delivered his cargo, so he's done with us.
Not at that point.
Oh, not yet?
No, not at that point. He is, at this point, looking to find the contact.
He's still trying.
He doesn't know who to give them to.
Mm.
So he's kind of asking around, and based on his backstory, he's also looking for this other pirate crew. And he was told to seek one of the chieftains. So, but at the same time, being that the player doesn't know what's going on, as well as his character.
And didn't have the info.
Right. He wanted to go out by himself, but being that a veteran player that Tobias's character player knows that obviously you don't want to let your rookie player just go walk off on their own, because that's just a recipe of disaster. So he kind of leverages Tobias to kind of join in with him, basically being, hey, I'm a Mirren, I'll show you around. I'm the one to teach you. And the thing too is this was a kind of subtext to the touching of the stone. Because ever since V had touched the stone, Tobias has kind of been side-eyeing V a little bit, as it's a little strange, the reaction that V kind of tried to hide, but in actuality, nobody can hide anything from Tobias with his passive insight.
Right. He's too good.
So
he sees all.
So I think that was a real kind of moment of really Tobias kind of subtly also getting his information, because they kind of make their way to this area with Tobias also, even though claiming to be this Mirren, both on his character sheet and in the game, he's not very intelligent or doesn't really know much about the history of his people, because he's from a outcast, or a clan that's been shoved out and casted out. So it's funny when he's like, I'll be your guide. I really don't know anything, but I'll be your guide.
Right. Last time I was here, I was 4.
Right. And so it was kind of that interesting, way in. And so when they get in, they really don't know what to expect, because as they go, the Rooka people are kind of a new take on the Kenku of Dungeons and Dragons. And so obviously the Kenku evoke a certain idea and theme.
Yeah, a little annoying birdies.
You never know, right? You never know what to expect. But what they found were instead these kind of almost like, these little tiny like groundhog birds, essentially, that were burrowing under the birds. Little pheasant is kind of a real way to look at it. Little pheasant and quail that just kind of scurry about and duck under the ground. But the main thing they notice is that they're all just like kind of like jerks, not like in a mean, not in like a mean way, as like a little like 2 foot tall bird could be, but they're just like, they just crack jokes, and they are like relentless, and nothing is off limits, as they are just insulting
ultimate
the
comedians
two in any way they can, because Lady Cree's thing is kind of to embarrass people, especially men, to put them off their kilter.
So birdseed, as bird does,
right? And so as they come to this kind of large mound, they don't really know what's going on, and they just watch as like a door just kind of opens up, and as the door opens up, it's it's not a very tall door, because these creatures, the Rooka themselves, are very small. But it's enough for the two to get in. But as Tobias kind of has to scrunch down and kind of crawl on all fours to get in, as he's like almost 7 foot tall, I think. With V, but as V kind of makes his way through, the wall kind of starts to shrink down, making him kind of crawl lower and lower and lower. And as they enter, Lady Cree, in this kind of overdone gown, kind of like a makeshift boa with her hair in this like turban kind of up with these feathers. Plumes, these feathers that you would imagine in our time would be in the turban, or actually just her plumage that she has left coming out. And she just enters, saying like, they don't have to crawl for her, there's no need to grovel, even though she totally intentionally
made them do
this.
it.
But what the interesting thing, and the first thing that they both discover, is that like this character, this entity has like massive control over the ground around them. They watch as she just kind of animates the ground in various structures and creates little puppets and creatures that kind of walk and do and take care of her, where even though she's in this large kind of hut by herself, she's being taken care of by many different servants of various types that are all made of stone and mud and dirt. But really the biggest part of it is because of this first meeting. This is really Lady Cree's first chance of seeing Captain V in all his bluish glory, and it's her favorite color, so how could she not fall in love? And as there's been some discussion, and as there's been some talk, she had learned of as Captain V had said, being a captain of a ship. And I really felt that Lady Cree really envisioned a kind of more of the Fabio-esque romance novel of like the pirate captain, even though V is just kind of standing here, he's just kind of this like smaller lizard type guy, but in reality she's got the muscles and the abs and the flowing wind, his hair, even though he has no hair, flowing off, right? Lizard folk. And she is just instantly infatuated. And it's one of those things where, as much as they know they're the new, they're new guys, they're not only low in level, but they're low in status, right? So they don't want to push this, but then when they start realizing just how powerful she is, they very much know they have to play along. And I loved it too, because during this time, it's the moment that when both Tobias and Richard realize that Lady Cree has kind of gotten a thing for
Captain
V. And me as the dungeon master, I love that because then I knew I had a buddy.
Yeah.
I had a partner that was going to help me very much make this a much more fun interaction.
Yeah.
Because I just knew, because I think I looked at him and I had this big grin on his face where he's like, oh, it's going to be one of these character NPCs. As she just makes V just squabble and asks all these inappropriate questions. And mind you, this is my new player, so I don't think he was quite ready for such a probing NPC to go on to kind of, hit on him so hard. As well as she looked to be quite old.
Yeah.
Lady Cree pushing a couple 100 years at this point. But really the real kind of point that was the most important to me in this scene I loved was as they're leaving. Now obviously there's the door thing, and they kind of both, I remember Thomas and Richard both being like, okay, here we go again. And then it just being when Tobias gets the door, nice giant door, no crawling,
walks
let
right
out,
through.
perfectly fine. But then as V gets, the door just shrinks, goes all the way to the ground, and it becomes this question of like, okay, is he going to do it?
Yeah.
Is he going to like
How
submit,
badly
or
does
is
he
he
wanna
going to
get
fight
out?
back? It was kind of that like question because now he's alone, and it's like, ooh, is he going to say something? Is he going to do something? And then he just kind of turns and just reluctantly slinks out. And if I remember right, he gets like a nat 20 during this time. So I think this is one of the few times he discovers that when he's indoors, and gets a nat 20, it doesn't strike him.
Yeah, he's fine.
They hear it attack outside. And then as they're leaving, they watch as there is this kind of like now museum row. As there is now statue after statue that is being formed in these overdone characterizations of Lady Cree and V in very precarious poses, very much like what you'd see on soap opera or on the romance novels, in different poses as they're leaving, with all the little other Rooka kind of sitting there waiting to watch him come out and just start laughing at him the whole time. So as he's walking, they're just going around, and as they go through these tunnels, they can even hear them laughing in their tunnels as it gets echoed out, as they are just like mad insulting this guy. Like I imagine he was bright purple. As the red of his...
Is that how he blushes? Bright purple?
If you're red and blue, you turn purple, right?
That makes sense. That makes sense.
As they kind of made their way out. But really the funniest thing and the biggest capping point that I loved about this scene was a little tidbit that most people on my team, on my players and my characters didn't really know. And that at the very end, Lady Cree offers for V to meet with her at the very end of the festival.
Yeah.
Only 2 people knew outside of game what that meant. One of them being the player for Tobias and one of them being you.
Yep.
And we'll reveal this later as we get to it. I don't want to spoil it too much. But having V just openly be like, yeah, and watching Richard die on the side, knowing what actually he just agreed to, that was most of the whole scene for me. Because it was like, I had been waiting so long to see if I could get someone, and I know that I think Richard too was trying to be like, how can we make this work as funny as possible?
How can we entice someone to try and join?
It's like, well, it's the end, so it can't be spoiled until the end, because if it's too soon, and so just to get that out there, where I was like, okay, if nothing goes wrong, I mean, when does that ever happen? But this could lead to another great scene that would be very interesting.
Very interesting.
I mean, hey, they're both their species lays eggs.
Technically speaking.
But I feel like what is more important is obviously my view on this and yours as well. But I feel like if we get a ground view would be better. And what not better than our reviewer, or our reporter on the ground, Luna.
Yeah, we need it straight from the source.
As she gets to kind of question Tobias exactly on what exactly went down, as Captain V doesn't seem to want to talk to anybody at the moment.
Right? That's so strange.
So Luna, are you there?
Hello? Thank you, couple of nerds. Welcome to Traveler Tidings with Luna. I'm here with Tobias today. I have never quite seen Captain V with that shade of purple on his face before. What exactly happened? You two went off somewhere, came back, and all of a sudden he's mum's the word, won't say a thing to us. Can you fill us in?
Yes, we had a very interesting interaction with the leader of the Rooka.
Oh.
A very lovely spry old bird.
Oh, I
Who
see.
seems to have a infatuation with the color blue.
Oh, and I assume she was attracted to our illustrious captain.
She seemed to be very taken back by the captain.
Oh.
Yes, and she didn't seem to want to hide her feelings at all.
Oh my! What did she do exactly? Because he won't even say anything to us. He just walked off. He seems rather embarrassed. Did she publicly humiliate him or something?
Fairly publicly, most of the Rooka probably saw what happened as
no.
he and I had to crawl into her tent.
Crawl?
Yeah, the first, the door didn't seem very big, but we're like, yeah, the
they are
Rooka are
very
very
small.
small,
Yeah.
but she can control the size of the door,
Uh-oh.
and I think she just wanted to see it happen.
Do you think she wanted to check out your front sides and back sides as you came in?
Well, as we left, the door was perfectly fine for me. I walked out with no problem, but poor Captain V had to snake his way out of there.
I see. You're not quite her taste. She's more into pirate captains.
The shirtless blue one seemed to do it for her.
I see. Well, it is a fairly romanticized occupation. The
Sea captain, yes.
The sea captain, yes. So, I hope all the best for Captain V. It's really quite strange, though. I've never seen him that embarrassed. I do hope you will not let him live this down.
Oh, I will not. But I think he needed my help. I don't think he knew how to deal with this sort of type. I think she was very forward, and he's very much so used to people who are sly and talking riddles.
I see. He has been rather reserved.
Yeah.
I've noticed he, keeps very to himself.
I think that's more his style. She was very forward with him.
I see. And, I have noticed, because between the two of you, there's such a great difference. You are much more thoughtful. You think about not just your words, but your actions as well before you do anything. Whereas Captain V is, let's just say, a mite more reckless with his life as well as his actions. How does that work in the group as we travel together?
Well, I think we help each other. I am sometimes a little too tight-lipped and a little more reluctant to speak, and sometimes he can help break the ice and, put the foot forward. Although sometimes it is more like, throwing a giant boulder at the ice rather than just breaking it.
I see. It's a matter of degrees, right? And
yes.
You two, it seems, as you're saying, you help balance each other out.
Yeah, I think if I stick close enough to him, I can start rounding off some of the bad he does and make him a good person.
Oh,
or at least close enough to.
Oh, that's really sweet. It definitely gives you the big brother sort of figure in his life,
It seems the sort. He's already pretty annoyed with me, it seems, and
I
I'm trying my best to embarrass him.
Yes. Well, let's do our best, shall we? And I also wanted to ask, because you are a native of here, and you've been to the festival before. How does it feel being back in Arnknoka?
That's very strange. The last time I was here, I was just a little cub, and I didn't get to leave very far from the caravan, especially not the last night. They pretty much made me stay inside of the wagon and the whole night, yeah. But the nights before were very pleasant.
Oh, was there something rather special going on at the end there?
Yeah, it's a big part of the festival. I can't wait for everybody to find out.
A very good surprise to keep in store for us. And with that note, we'll leave a little bit of mystery there and hop over to Richard so that he can give us a little bit of insight on his own. Thank you for joining us today, Tobias.
Anytime.
So, Richard, thank you for joining us here now that Tobias has gone on his way. I really love how Tobias's character just works out, how, especially with the dichotomy with Captain V, you explore challenges and different secrets together and separately, of course. So how does that work, since you both have a sort of secrets that you're managing on your different levels of story? How do you manage everything, keeping your secrets as well as divulging information?
I think it's pretty hard sometimes to keep secrets. I have like a big urge to want to share all the stories that I'm building. So it's hard to bottle them up all the time and find the right places to drop them. Because I don't think I try and hold them in forever. I think it's trying to find the right cinematic points to drop them for the best effect.
That is true, right? You do want to drop them where, if not the best cinematic, I suppose, where it fits best in the story.
Yeah, I want it to be more thematic and make sense. I try very hard to avoid feeling like I'm just exposition dumping at somebody.
Understood. It should be more organic.
Yeah, I like it to be brought out, but sometimes it's hard because then, you feel like you're snaking out a string for somebody to grasp at, and then people miss it, and you keep missing the chance.
Oh, dear. You're no stranger to trying out different secrets and secret missions. You used to play a character named Zephyr in Campaign 2, and you had a secret mission there that I think we never found out as a group until the very end, once it was over, and so our actual party never found out. How did that work out for you? How did it feel keeping such a big secret?
I was excited the entire time. It was such a thrill. Honestly, I tried to keep lying to a minimum and just Tai Chi everybody else's thoughts. A few of the players had a lot of wild theories that they'd love to share with me, and I loved agreeing with them and prodding them into the wrong direction and feeding into their theories about who they think it might be. Never really like lying to them, but just whenever they say what they think, I'm like, you could be right. That's something to explore.
That sounds like it's plausible.
Kind of just leading them along and trying my best not to speak, especially having the motivator of if you talk, you die is pretty good.
Right. That is very clever, and I think it's a good way, to operate when you are trying to keep a secret. Also, having the threat from a demon over your head is rather helpful.
I did very much so. A few times want to speak aloud the things that were happening. I tried changing up his attitude and his playstyle a little bit throughout, maybe acting a little bit more ruthless in situations where he would have acted with mercy before. And especially one of the situations I got into with another player where she believed another NPC's death was her fault, and it was directly because of me and my actions. I texted Eguile, the DM, to let him know that I was going to try to stealthily leave a dagger for this person to find without any of my other party finding out, and it altered the other player's way of playing her character and was a big story plot, and I was both full of pride and so happy that this was coming about, this big change, but it also felt so guilty for the blame that the character put onto herself.
Oh my. Well, I always think that those are good things, right? Because whenever there's tension, it always helps, and it came about so organically that it really fits into the story properly. So I think you've done a great job with it, no matter how nefarious it might have been. And also, it's really tough, especially when you do an accent in character and in game, to stay in character and to keep your sort of mannerisms. How do you keep that during session?
I find them actually to be a lot easier. When my first character, I did no voice and I didn't change my mannerisms too much. I tried being a little bit more angry, which for me was a little hard because I'm not a very angry person. But, voice and my jokes weren't very different. And then my second character, I tried acting differently, but I still had my voice. And I found that easier to stay in character if I was trying to keep a different mindset. And finally, keeping a different voice and trying to use different expressions and trying to remember that my character has a very low intelligence score and trying to keep myself under, from saying things that might be too intelligent or and whatnot. It helps a lot, I think, actually, to keep myself in character and keep my mind from slipping out my own thoughts, whereas my character's thoughts. It helps a lot, actually, keeping it all in separate folders almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Using your stats as a way to keep your personality also in your brain, it really helps out, I think, as a reference point. I like that. That's a very good sort of tip there if anybody's out there wondering how to keep in character during sessions. I'd also like to ask how you use your role play to drop hints, to drop clues to people, to reveal parts of your backstory.
Oh, so that would be hard because it depends on what the hints and what the backstory thing can be. But I want it to, again, always come out naturally. I always, even though I really want to get the secret out there or I want to get this little tidbit of backstory out there, I always want it to be really natural. So I try and give like a branch for somebody to grab onto. And sometimes it slips past people, especially with we have so many people at the table. Like little dialogues happen and people just miss things sometimes, especially when you're trying to be subtle. So sometimes I'll put it out there a few more times, and then if it's not really like getting an easy grab, maybe I might make it a little bit more clear, like do something to draw more attention that might just be that something that's all flavor and has no real standing, but it's something to be like, oh, okay, so if it's something my character might just be doing in the world, it's something that they would have noticed, but maybe, we've been in party together more often, so maybe it's a thing you might notice, like Tobias rubbing his hands and when they're sore and they ache from his scars and whatnot.
Yeah, we would notice something like that.
Yeah, especially traveling with a party. Like, you might not notice that, like, when you first start.
Right away, yeah.
But then, like, eventually, like, hanging out with somebody, it's like, oh, you noticed a lot. Like, especially after casting magic, he's always rubbing at his hands and whatnot.
Oh, I see. That's a good way to put it. You always want to not just observe during sessions, but you want to keep a sort of track as to how things are changing during the different sessions as they go on. I like that. That's very observational. And there's also hidden quests, character secrets, and they really help deepen the role-playing experience. Does that help you in any way, having all these extra hidden sort of missions and secrets to keep? Does that help with the role play at all?
I think it does. I think it definitely helps my character feel more real and fleshed out. Because I think if everybody knew everything about everybody's character completely, it would kind of feel like we had... when you play a game and you start off and everybody gets to pick their character. Like, you read through every option and then you kind of just decide who wants to do what. So it wouldn't feel as special, I think, because, even when you have close friends, you might not know every single thing about their backstory that makes them who they are.
True.
So I think it makes the people feel more real. Where, like, you could talk to somebody for months and months and months and then still find something new about them, you know what I mean? Or maybe what their motivations might be. Even if they were aligned, they might be from a different reason to have the same motivation. So I think stuff like that makes it more rich.
Yes, that's a really good point to put it at. You always want to take the time and notice. And thank you so much for joining us today, Richard. It was really nice having you here for our Traveler Tidings episode. Thank you.
Can't wait to come back.
Absolutely. And we're going to give it right back to a couple of nerds here. Back to you, D&D wife. Thank you, Luna, for that lovely interview with Tobias and Richard. We look forward to hearing from them again.
Yeah, so now, obviously, we still have Richard here with us. Thanks again for sticking around for a little longer.
Yeah.
But really what we want to do is kind of look a little bit more, and I like this as an opportunity for you guys as the players, me as the DM, to kind of ask those questions behind sometimes that are kind of the more important things. The first thing that I wanted to take the opportunity, and I think this was a good option, was, so for you, Richard, I think this was like the big thing for me looking at you as a character and a player was your first time being kind of the moral compass of a group, as your last two characters, though I wouldn't say necessarily like the most evilest characters on earth.
Debaucherous.
They were very self-serving.
Yeah.
Obviously Zephyr had the love of the kids, but it was really more of that like responsibility. But this is, I feel like, the first time you're really playing a character that's kind of like the mama bear of the character of the party.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's times where it feels so opposite my personality, where like things like I'll be interacting with the NPC or something and they say something to me and my first thought is immediate like sass or murder. And I've got to like bite it down and cool it and like okay, this is what I would do. So what would Tobias do instead?
Yeah, and I was thinking it was really like the point that with the interview with Luna was really pointing out is like that usage of accents. I feel out of all the people, you really harping, because what most listeners don't know is like in the very beginning, I was like, all right, we're doing gut check rules. So if you say it, it happens. But the caveat, though, is if your character has an accent, the character has to say it in the accent.
Yeah.
I feel like you took a big advantage of that.
Yeah, I needed to. If I didn't, I would have died so early in the game.
Because I was like, I feel like half the reason you picked to be an accent was like, okay, I know if I at least do this, it's a safety net for me.
Right.
Like, horrible for you guys to imagine, I bite down like a good 40% of my jokes that don't come out onto the floor. So if I had to like also try to do that but not my accent, like it would be so hard.
It would have been tough, yeah.
I mean, D&D wife, you've had an accent for every single character.
Yep.
I feel like the difference is for you sometimes is the nuance between them, because sometimes they kind of blend together, at least on our end, because we're not as nuanced.
I mean, I don't know. My first one was a Russian accent, then I did an Irish accent, and now I'm doing a British accent. I guess the Irish and British might sort of
be
mix
the same.
if
Was
you're not.
Alira a Russian accent?
Yes, she was.
I
Well,
never got
took
that.
Eastern European
I
accent.
never really got that. Yeah.
I would say.
I straight up was getting more of like the jester gypsy type of like accent.
Well,
but I thought it tied in with
the way I
that.
did her is she's a mix of Vex's like personality with Jester's voice. So it's very sultry. It's
she knew her
deeper.
sex appeal.
Yeah,
So she
very
knew to
much
use
so.
it.
I was a bard. I knew exactly
Yeah.
what was going on.
I just thought,
Canonically have made unsexy characters.
yeah, very true. Very true. For me, I think the biggest thing, and as we've been talking about through this episode, like kind of the hidden backstories and stuff. And now the biggest thing I think to preference this is that now obviously you guys made backstories. And then I take a little bit of your backstory and kind of take a little DM creative license and then throw kind of these extra stuff on top. Now, is that now as players, do you guys take that as like, okay, hey, you're messing with my character, or is that something that you guys actually enjoy?
Oh, I love it.
Okay.
Me too.
Yeah, for me, again with going to the richness of the character, especially when I'm building something into my backstory of like betrayal or like some big like event that like changes things, especially when it's supposed to be a mystery, it feels cheap when I'm building it out knowing who the villains are going to be and whatnot.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
I way prefer to like throw you the seeds of like what happened and then let you build the structure from that of why and like from where, so that it still is it makes it easier for me to not have to worry about metagaming or anything. Like it is coming to me as like a real thing.
Yeah, because in a real world scenario, we wouldn't know who our enemies are or who's plotting against us or exactly how far along they are. But if we're doing all the planning, it just kind of takes the excitement out of it, the fun out of the gameplay. So I really like leaving it to the DM. Speaking as someone who picked a character that has amnesia,
you have to.
I left everything to the DM in this one. So
right, I think it's like there's always that worry of like reducing player agency, which is like always something I don't want to do. But I mean, it is one of those things, and we were talking about it earlier too, though, is like that trust. Yeah. It's kind of a double-edged sword, because as we were talking earlier, Richard, we were saying like your ableness to not metagame and avoiding kind of saying things essentially allowed Thomas to stay in the dark way longer than he was ever supposed to. So it's one of those points where it's like, by you doing the right thing, we actually let a guy sink for a while.
But sometimes that's kind of what you need. It's like my first session in D&D. Like everybody kind of just sitting on the side, like silently watching as I was legitimately drowning at one point, like with so much things that at my disposal that could have incredibly saved me and made it so much easier. But sometimes you've got to be the newbie who's just panicking and doing everything you can, like just hitting all the buttons.
And I think that's like the fun part about it too, because I mean, as a new player, I imagine there's so much going on. Like you were saying, when you were new, it's like sometimes you have just got to see failing upwards is kind of a part of D&D. And I think that was what this moment was, where it was like, yes, it was this really awkward ass interaction, but at the same time, it was this fun because it kind of showed us that kind of Captain V, aka Thomas, was really going to play into the story as well. It wasn't just a shutdown or, okay, everyone's making fun of me. I'm out.
I don't want this.
It was very much like, oh, I see how it is. I see how it is. And it's like, I'll get back. I'll have revenge.
I'll figure this out. I'll get the last word.
Right. I always thought that was kind of funny too, because speaking with this, you two still are really the only ones that know what happens at the end of the festival.
Yeah.
So I think this is just a hilarious point, and I know you and I. Was there any will that you've been trying to, like, in the early parts, not just like straight up be like, hey, this is what you signed up for?
Yeah, I never wanted to tell anybody what was happening.
Me neither.
Like I was excited for them to find out, but I never wanted to spoil it. I liked dropping subtle hints, like mentioning that it was a festival of love, and this is where people go to prove themselves to help further the strength of their clan.
Yeah.
So I was dropping things that it's like, if you were really picking the pieces and maybe had a couple more, you might know what was gonna you're in for. but enough for that to just be casual. People are like, yeah, like that sounds really cool. I can't wait to experience it all.
Great people.
Yeah.
And then obviously with you, DDWife, I mean, you knew, but there was zero real way. Oh, no, actually, there was a story way that we introduced how you kind of knew.
Yeah.
But it wasn't as, like, impactful for you.
And I didn't end up revealing anything about the end of the festival.
No, your gross out reveal was about a whole different thing about the bucket. And all
Yeah.
The buckets.
Yeah. Which we have already discussed before.
We have.
About Luna holding the bucket.
It was not a gross bucket. It was just a bucket of paint. But everybody took it wrong because I said it weird. So now it exists in the world.
No, like the last little point I wanted to kind of ask is like, how much do you feel kind of, obviously having secrets, when you feel like, or if you, come to find out and know it, like how much do you feel that empowers you in your play? So like if you kind of have, you have this backstory, you think you kind of know something about a player. Do you think that kind of changes a little bit of how you kind of interact with that player and try to not, it's like that whole like, I know, but you don't know that I know, but I want you to know that I know, but I also don't want to share the secret.
Yeah.
Kind of like what I find like a lot of D&D players have. And I feel like for your two players, Luna and Tobias, you guys have like kind of a very equal opportunity of this like backstory that you know that no one else does.
For me, I get a lot of history of the world of Extraeus through getting some of my memories back. So that's where like my sort of, I guess, advantage comes. But it only comes in the moment of things when I experience them. So I wouldn't say it's much of an advantage. But I don't know for you, Richard, how that is.
I don't know if it's necessarily an advantage. I feel like sometimes I just want to like let it all out and just say everything, but then it wouldn't feel right, like to just blurt everything out. But I also feel like sometimes work so hard on like backstory that's meticulous. Like there's like such a worry that's like it's just never going to be brushed on, and it's just like no, this work.
I work so much.
It's like I'm sure you know that same thing where it's like the fear of like not even the fear of like people not finding it, but it's just like I work so hard on it. I want people to like experience it too. I feel like if you ever just shaking a bag of treats around a dog, and the dog, like you're telling it to sit down, and it's just trying to sit still, but it's still like freaking
so
out.
hyped.
Yeah. He's trying. He's really trying to keep it together.
So it's like secrets are good, and I love having them. But also sometimes I just want to blurt things out, or it's like whenever I get like a new ability unlock, like I want to be able to show it off in game instead of just being like, hey everybody, by the way, I can do this now. Like I want to be able to like
everybody knows it.
Yeah. So I want things to be organic because in the end, like D&D is supposed to feel like an organic story.
Yeah.
Not just you woke up the next day and suddenly have new powers.
Right,
Like, hey, I've been practicing. This is what I learned. This is what I changed up.
It's been over the course of a few years.
I did a montage episode.
It's kind of the same thing going back to like dialogue and exposition and like trying to help out other new players. Like you could sometimes like watch movies or like read books. And you could tell like the good dialogue versus bad words. Somebody was just like vomiting exposition out and like telling somebody how something works. That's like, everybody uses that every day. You don't know to tell me how a cell phone works. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah. It's just like, but tell me what you need me to do, not how to do it.
Right.
Yeah, so you got to find ways to like sneakily put things out and like try and sway people into the right direction, like lightly, like
You got the makings of a young DM. Look at that. Look at that.
Already getting there.
So, final note on this scene, what would probably say is your most memorable moment for all of us? So, for me, I think just me is the grand introduction of Lady Cree and kind of having another one. Because at this point, we hadn't really had our momentous NPC yet.
Yeah.
And this to me was like that first of where I think for you guys as my players, we're like, oh, okay, we're back. This is that same campaign.
Yeah.
Like, we're back in that same mode. We're going to have these same kind of cast of kooky characters.
Yeah.
Because I pushed so much that it was going to be such a serious campaign that I think it was a little worrisome that it was going to be like everyone is going to be serious. And it's
there's
nonstop.
no levity.
But no, it's still us.
Yeah.
It's still us
We
having
gotta
fun.
add little nuggets here and there, you know?
So, Richard, what would you say is probably like your favorite moment from
Lady Cree was a great character, and besides just being hilarious, we also got like, at least for my character, some pretty good information that would put me directly onto a line that would help me learn a lot of important information for my backstory. True. But more than that, I kind of liked the walk that me and V were on to get there when we just got lost and we were just talking. Yeah. Because it was one of the first times I got to like actually have a sidebar with that character, because up until then we were always kind of in separate groups constantly.
True. It was really kind of that first kind of
So
quiet walk.
it was one of those times where, especially because we are such opposite characters, to just get down and talk, and like up until then we had slightly butted heads as like the more merchant side of him trying to be more cheap, and obviously me trying to get more money. So like it was kind of like a nice thing to actually chat with his character, and then like kind of try and break the ice and like make him see that like my character isn't just the like preaches down at him and like the finger wagging
country bumpkin.
Yeah, so it was a nice experience. I think that was probably my favorite part of that section.
D&D what?
The exit, of course. I love seeing him walk away, theater in the round,
The statue. I had to do the statues.
Oh yeah, the hula girl and like the bee. Like when you were talking about it the first time, like I get the romance novel. I was thinking very much so more like Greek marble statues of like the people intertwined in like
Pretty
flowy
much.
fabrics and
Yeah,
whatnot.
no, this was like like if it were just carbon copies of every book cover you've seen.
Yep. And that brings us to the end of today's journey through the Traveler Chronicles. We hope you enjoyed exploring Arnknoka with us and maybe got a laugh or two at Captain V's eventful tea with Lady Cree.
Definitely one for the memory books, and always as a reminder, no matter how much you plan, the beauty of D&D is in those unexpected, sometimes awkward moments that lead to unforgettable stories. Obviously, want to thank you again, Richard, for stopping by, giving us little insights on Tobias and
Always happy to be here.
yourself.
And hey, if you're loving these tales and want to join the adventure, be sure to like, review, and subscribe to help other travelers find us too.
Yes, and don't forget to join us on Discord. We'd love to chat with all of you about any theories, DM tips, and your favorite campaign moments.
Thanks for tuning in, adventurers. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of Extraeus. Until then, keep rolling those nat 20s.
And may your travels be epic. Until next time.